By the spring of 1945, United States Army customs officers at the ports of Le Havre and Marseille were inspecting more than 10,000 duffel bags a day. They were looking for one thing above all others: captured German pistols. The regulation was specific. War Department Circular 155, issued in May 1944, permitted each soldier to bring home one captured enemy sidearm, provided it was unloaded, properly tagged, and accompanied by a signed capture paper from a commanding officer. Pistols without papers were to be confiscated. Pistols in violation were grounds for forfeiture of pay. Repeat offenders faced courts-martial, but the regulation collided with reality the moment Berlin fell. A GI standing in the wreckage of the Reich Chancellery in May 1945 was not thinking about paperwork. He was looking at a Walther PPK on the desk of a dead SS officer, a Luger in the holster of a surrendered Wehrmacht major, a Mauser in a glass case in some bombed-out armory off the Wilhelmstrasse. He took it, he hid it, he brought it home. The records show that of the estimated 2 million German pistols captured by American forces, fewer than 1 in 4 were ever properly registered. The rest crossed the Atlantic in coffee tins, in hollowed-out books, in the false bottoms of footlockers. These are the 10 pistols GIs smuggled home anyway. Before we get into the pistols themselves, you need to understand how the smuggling actually worked. The United States Army of 1945 had built the most sophisticated logistics chain in human history. Every soldier returning home passed through a redeployment center: Camp Lucky Strike in France, Camp Old Gold near Le Havre, Camp 20 Grand outside Rouen. At each stop, duffel bags were searched, footlockers were opened, personal effects were inspected. Officially, the searches were thorough. In practice, they were performed by exhausted enlisted men, inspecting thousands of bags a day, in muddy tent cities, with rain leaking through canvas roofs. A pistol wrapped in a wool sock and buried inside a rolled-up overcoat had roughly a 50% chance of going through untouched. A pistol disassembled into 3 pieces and distributed across different layers of a duffel bag had a much higher chance than that. Soldiers learned fast. Documented techniques included pistols sewn into the lining of dress uniforms, pistols hidden inside loaves of stale bread, pistols packed in the bottom of helmet liners, and in one case from the 9th Infantry Division, a complete Walther P-38 broken down and tucked inside a hollowed-out Bible. The officers knew. Many of the officers were doing the same thing themselves. By the time a returning GI reached his port of entry, New York, Boston, Norfolk, the customs inspection on American soil was a formality. The hard line had been at Le Havre. If you cleared Le Havre, you were home free. Well, what those duffel bags contained changed American gun collecting forever. The pistols you are about to see did not just survive the war, they survived the inspection, and they are still out there. Pistol number 10, the Walther P-38. The P-38 was the most common German service pistol of the second half of the war. Adopted by the Wehrmacht in 1938 to replace the aging Luger, it was cheaper to produce, more reliable in mud and cold, and used the same 9mm parabellum cartridge that fed the MP-40 submachine gun. By 1945, over 1 million had been built across 3 factories: Walther in Zella-Mehlis, Mauser in Oberndorf, and Spreewerke in Berlin. For a returning GI, a P-38 was the most accessible trophy in Europe. You could find one on almost any captured German officer. You could buy one from a starving civilian in exchange for a chocolate bar and a pack of Lucky Strikes. You could pick one up off the floor of a burned-out command post in the Ruhr. By May 1945, the supply was effectively unlimited. What made the P-38 prized was not rarity. It was the action. The P-38 was the first major military pistol in history to use a double-action trigger, meaning the first shot could be fired without manually cocking the hammer. American soldiers who had carried single-action 1911s their entire service careers had never seen anything like it. The technology would not appear in American service pistols for another 40 years. Soldiers in the 3rd Armored Division reportedly preferred P-38S with the AC-45 code stamp pistols manufactured at the Walther plant in the final weeks of the war. The fit and finish were rough. The metallurgy was suspect. But the pistol carried the date of the collapse of the Reich, and that was the point. Pistol number 9, the Luger P-8. If the P-38 was common, the Luger was sacred. By 1945, the Luger had been out of frontline German production for 3 years. The Wehrmacht had stopped issuing them in 1942. What remained in the field were veteran officer sidearms pistols carried through Poland, through France, through Russia, through the long retreat back to the borders of the Reich. A captured Luger was a captured story, and every GI knew it. The toggle lock action, that distinctive vertical hinge above the grip, was unlike anything in American service. The grip angle, raked steeply backward, pointed naturally at whatever the shooter looked at. The trigger was crisp. The accuracy at 25 yards was extraordinary. Officers in the 101st Airborne, the 82nd Airborne, the 1st Infantry Division, all documented bringing home Lugers in violation of trophy regulations. Some pistols still carried the original holster, the spare magazine, the small cleaning rod. Every modification broke the rules. Every officer ignored that fact. By 1946, the Luger P-8 had become the single most counterfeited war trophy in American gun shops. The originals had value, the originals had history, and the originals, almost all of them, had come home in a duffel bag that should have been searched more carefully. Pistol number 8, the Mauser C-96. By 1945, the Mauser C-96 was already an antique. Designed in 1896, it had served German forces in 2 world wars, multiple colonial conflicts, and the Chinese Civil War. The distinctive shape, a wooden grip set far behind a long protruding barrel, a fixed magazine forward of the trigger guard, looked like nothing else on any battlefield in 1945. Soldiers called it the broom handle. The C-96 in American hands by the end of the war came from 2 sources. The first was the Volkssturm, the desperate last-ditch militia drafted from old men and Hitler Youth in the final weeks. Many were issued whatever obsolete weapons remained in storage, and the C-96 came out of Berlin armories by the thousand. The second source was personal sidearms carried by older German officers, men who had fought in the trenches of 1917 and had never given up their original pistol. A captured C-96 was unmistakable in a duffel bag. The shape did not disassemble well. The wooden shoulder stock that doubled as a holster was nearly impossible to hide, and yet they came home anyway. Documented cases from veterans of the 69th Infantry Division, the unit that met Soviet forces at the Elbe, in April 1945 describe broom handle, Mausers wrapped in oilcloth and packed inside ration crates marked for shipment to officers' messes. Not a single shipment was sanctioned. Not a single crate was opened at the port. Pistol number 7. The Sauer 38H. Most Americans had never heard of the Sauer 38H before the war. By 1946, every serious collector in the United States knew the name. The 38H was a compact double-action pistol chambered in 7.65mm Browning, the European designation for what Americans called .32 ACP. It had been adopted in 1938 as a sidearm for Luftwaffe pilots, police officials, and senior bureaucrats of the Reich. The pistol was small, blued to a deep gloss, and built to a level of fit and finish that no American service pistol came close to. For a GI, finding a 38H meant one thing: you had captured someone important. The pistols turned up in surrendered Gestapo offices in Frankfurt, in Luftwaffe airfields in Bavaria, in the desk drawers of municipal police chiefs across the occupied zones. Many still carried the leather holsters of their previous owners, stamped with eagles and unit markings that would later become primary identification points for collectors. Read that again. The holsters told you who the pistol had belonged to. Soldiers from the 45th Infantry Division and the 36th Infantry Division, both of which moved through southern Germany in the final weeks, brought home large numbers of Sauer 38Hs. Command never approved any of it. Command knew exactly what was happening, and Command looked the other way. Pistol number 6. The Walther PP. The PP Polizei Pistole was a pre-war design that became one of the most coveted captures of 1945. Adopted by German police forces in 1929, it was issued throughout the Reich to detectives, plainclothes, Gestapo officers, party officials, and senior administrators. By the end of the war, almost every man of any importance in the German government carried one. For a GI, that was the point. A captured Walther PP was not the sidearm of a frontline infantryman. It was the sidearm of someone who had not expected to die in combat, someone who had carried a pistol for status, for self-defense, for the implicit threat it represented to the civilians under his authority. When that pistol came off the body of a captured official in a Munich hotel, or out of the desk of a surrendered Burgermeister in Augsburg, the GI who took it understood exactly what kind of trophy he was holding. The pistols frequently came with documentation still intact. Party identification cards, police credentials, letters of authorization on Reich stationery. Soldiers in the 7th Army, sweeping through Bavaria in April and May 1945, reportedly captured Walther PPs by the hundred, often with the holster, the spare magazine, and the original owner's papers still tucked inside. Would you have left the papers behind or kept them as part of the story? Pistol number 5. The Mauser HSC. The HSC was the Mauser Company's answer to the Walther PP. Adopted in 1940, it was issued to Kriegsmarine officers, Luftwaffe pilots, Wehrmacht staff officers, and various police and party officials. The design was elegant, a streamlined slide that wrapped almost completely around the barrel, hammer concealed except at full cock, a deeply blued finish that caught the light differently than any other pistol on the battlefield. You see, the HSC was the kind of pistol a returning soldier showed his father. Production figures matter here. Mauser built roughly 250,000 HSC pistols during the war. Of those, conservative estimates suggest that between 40 and 60,000 crossed the Atlantic in American duffel bags between May 1945 and the formal end of trophy shipping in 1947. The pistol was small enough to hide in almost anything: a wool sock, a shaving kit, the false bottom of a footlocker. Documented captures from the 1st Infantry Division, the 4th Infantry Division, and the 9th Infantry Division describe HSC pistols taken from surrendered Kriegsmarine officers at the northern German ports of Kiel, Wilhelmshaven, and Bremen in May 1945. Every change broke the rules. Every officer who saw it pretended not to. By the time American forces consolidated their hold on the occupation zones in the summer of 1945, the HSC had become the most smuggled small-caliber pistol of the war. And the Mauser factory at Oberndorf, captured intact by American forces in April, would later be stripped of its tooling and its remaining inventory under direct orders that never appeared in any official record. Pistol number 4. The Astra 600. This one almost no one talks about, which is exactly why it matters. The Astra 600 was a Spanish pistol, not a German one, but it was built specifically for the Wehrmacht under a 1943 contract that delivered roughly 10,000 pistols to German forces before the war ended. The design copied the basic layout of the Browning 1903, a simple blowback action chambered in 9mm parabellum, but the manufacturing was distinctly Spanish, with markings in both German and Spanish on the slide. For a GI in 1945, an Astra 600 was a puzzle. The pistol had German military proof marks. It had a German Waffenamt acceptance stamp. But the maker's name was foreign, and the construction was unfamiliar. Soldiers who captured them often had no idea what they were holding. The pistols turned up in the holsters of Waffen-SS men, in the kit of Kriegsmarine officers, in the desks of Gestapo officials in the Western occupation zones. The 8th Infantry Division and the 78th Infantry Division both documented Astra 600 captures during the Rhine crossings in March 1945. Most went home undocumented. Command never could control any of it. Today, an original Astra 600 with verified German military acceptance markings is one of the rarest war trophies in American collections. Pistol number 3, the captured Browning High Power. If you've made it this far, you understand this is not about heroes or villains. It's about choices made under pressure. Stay with me. The Browning High Power was a Belgian design manufactured at the Fabrique Nationale plant in Herstal. When German forces overran Belgium in May 1940, they captured the factory intact, and they kept it running. From 1940 to 1944, FN produced high powers for the German military, designated the Pistole 640B, with German military markings stamped over the original Belgian inspector codes. A GI who captured a high power in 1944 or 1945 was holding a pistol that had been built by occupied Belgian workers, accepted by German inspectors, and carried into combat against the Allies. The provenance was unlike anything else. The pistols were issued primarily to Waffen-SS units and to Fallschirmjäger paratroopers, the elite of the Wehrmacht. Captures from the Ardennes in December 1944 and January 1945 produced significant numbers of German-marked high powers in American hands. Soldiers in the 99th Infantry Division and the 106th Infantry Division, both of which absorbed the initial German breakthrough, brought home high powers with the original brown leather Wehrmacht holsters still attached. These weapons were not carried by accident. They were carried by choice. After Belgium was liberated in September 1944, FN went back to producing high powers for the Allies under the same roof where they had been producing them for Germany weeks earlier. The pistols looked identical. Only the markings told you which side had held the factory the day yours was built. Read that again. Same factory, same workers. Two different wars. Pistol number 2, the SS-marked Walther PPK. The PPK was the smaller variant of the Walther PP Polizeipistole Criminal, designed in 1931 for plainclothes detective work. It was compact enough to disappear in a coat pocket, accurate enough to be useful at conversational distance, and finished to a standard that made it a status symbol from the day it was introduced. By the late 1930s, the PPK had become the unofficial sidearm of the Nazi Party leadership. Hermann Göring carried one. Heinrich Himmler carried one. Reinhard Heydrich carried one. Joseph Goebbels carried one. The pistol appeared in countless propaganda photographs tucked into the belt of a black uniformed officer, resting on a desk during a staged meeting, prominent in the holster of a man giving an order that would later be read out at Nuremberg. For a GI, in 1945, capturing a PPK marked with SS runes or party insignia was the trophy of a lifetime. The pistols turned up in the desk drawers of surrendered Gestapo officials in Munich, in the bunkers under the Reich Chancellery, in the country estates of high party functionaries across Bavaria and Austria. Soldiers in the 7th Army and the 3rd Army, the units that took Munich, Berchtesgaden, and Salzburg in the final weeks, captured PPKs by the dozen, many still in their original presentation cases, with the owner's name engraved on a brass plate. These weapons were not carried by accident. They were carried by choice. And the closer we get to number 1, the higher the stakes become. Pistol number 1, the presentation pistol. These pistols never appeared in any official inventory. They were never issued. They were never standardized. They existed because the leadership of the Reich believed in personal monuments, and they had the resources to commission them. A presentation pistol was a custom firearm, engraved by hand, inlaid with gold or silver, fitted with grips of carved ivory, ebony, or staghorn, built by master gunsmiths at Walther, at Mauser, at Karl Walther's custom workshop in Zella Mellis. Each one was made for a single recipient, a general promoted, a party official rewarded, a foreign dignitary entertained, a senior SS officer celebrated on a specific date stamped into the barrel. When the war ended, those pistols were everywhere and nowhere. GIs who reached the country retreats of the Reich leadership in the spring of 1945, the Berghof at Berchtesgaden, the hunting lodge at Karenhall, the apartments of party officials across what remained of the Reich found presentation pistols in display cases, in desk drawers, in safes that had been blown open hours before by retreating SS guards. Documented cases from soldiers of the 7th Army describe gold-inlaid Walthers taken from the rubble of the Berghof in May 1945. A captain in the 101st Airborne reportedly recovered an engraved Mauser HSC from the personal effects of a captured Luftwaffe field marshal. An infantryman in the 3rd Infantry Division brought home a silver-mounted Sauer 38H taken from the desk of a regional Gauleiter outside Salzburg. None of these captures were ever properly registered. None of these pistols ever passed a customs inspection at Le Havre, and yet they came home in shoebox-sized wooden cases, wrapped in officers' silk handkerchiefs, hidden in the false bottoms of footlockers that nobody opened. Today, an authenticated Nazi presentation pistol with verifiable provenance can sell at auction for more than the cost of the house most American veterans bought when they came home from the war. The trophies outlived the men who took them, and the men who took them rarely told their families exactly where they came from. The pistols you just saw are still out there. Most of them sit in safes in American suburbs, in collections passed from father to son, in estate sales in towns nobody outside the county has heard of. The men who carried them home in 1945 are nearly all gone. Now the youngest veterans of the European theater are well into their 90s, but the trophies remain, silent, unregistered, often unrecognized for what they actually are. Every authenticated Nazi-era pistol in American hands today represents a small act of defiance committed 80 years ago by a soldier who decided that the war he had fought was going to follow him home in some physical form. Command had a regulation. The soldier had a duffel bag. The duffel bag won. The records will never be complete. War Department Circular 155 generated paperwork on perhaps 400,000 sidearms. The actual number that crossed the Atlantic was at least 4 times higher, and the gap between those two figures is the size of an unwritten history, one carried home in pieces by men who never expected anyone to ask. This is what victory looked like at the small scale, not parades, not speeches. A pistol wrapped in a wool sock at the bottom of a green canvas bag, riding home in the hold of a Liberty ship across the North Atlantic in the summer of 1945. If you believe the soldiers who fought the war earned the right to bring home a piece of what they had survived, subscribe. This channel exists for the history they did not write down. Next time, we open the Pacific Files. The trophies American Marines brought home from Iwo Jima, Okinawa, and the home islands of Japan. The samurai swords, the captured Nambu pistols, and the items that were never supposed to leave the islands at all. The European trophies were only half of